Now this week, a report from University College London has found that so-called floating bus stops are causing significant fear and distress for visually impaired people. Johnny Harvey explains.
Known officially as bus stop bypasses, floating bus stops are designed with cycle lanes going around them, keeping cyclists out of the main road. However, this design means bus passengers have to cross the cycle lane to access the bus, with cyclists often failing to stop, which can lead to collisions like this one. For visually impaired people, the problem is exacerbated by not being able to see or hear oncoming cyclists, and as there's no consistent layout to these stops, identifying the mini zebra crossing can be challenging. This has led to a report commissioned by the charity Guide Dogs to conclude that though fatalities from cyclist-pedestrian collisions are unlikely, the design of these bus stops creates dangerous and stressful situations for visually impaired people. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, told the BBC earlier this year that the bus stops were installed because a disproportionate number of cyclists had been injured and killed as a consequence of buses. But a TfL report later found that 56 of the 164 stops currently in place in London had significant design issues. The charity Guide Dogs are now calling for the rollout of these designs to be halted unless accessibility can be improved and their safety guaranteed.
Well, joining us now is campaigner Taylor Notcutt, who is blind, and she is here with her guide dog, Jilly. Welcome to you both. Great to have you on the programme.
Thanks for having us.
Now, as a disability campaigner, what experiences have you had with these floating bus stops?
Well, the floating bus stops I've definitely seen pop up over the last few years, and as a guide dog owner and also previously I was a long cane user, they are incredibly dangerous. When you're working with a guide dog and you get off the bus, the dog will put its back paws on the bus and its front paws off the bus, so I can feel how big the step is. But when Jilly does this, she is fully in the cycle lane. So even before I've got off the bus, the dog is at risk. And then as a long cane user, quite often the cane will come off of the bus. And again, if a cyclist goes past, this could be incredibly dangerous for them as well, because the cane tip could go into the bike. So both ways, it's really dangerous for the cyclist, the dog, and for the visually impaired person to get on and off of the bus.
So, in fact, having Jilly with you doesn't actually help at all, really, in this instance, does it? It makes it possibly more dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Because with a guide dog, you're working as a team and you're moving together, and the dog quite often will be in front of you or alongside you. So either way, the dog is going ahead, or if it's next to you, if a cyclist is coming along, the dog will be hit potentially first, or you, which is, really disconcerting. And for visually impaired people, our main mode of transport is tube, train, or like getting a bus. So if bus stop borders and floating bus stops are becoming more and more frequent, I'm definitely aware of this. When I look up my route, I make sure the stop I'm getting off at, if it has a bus stop border, I will get off earlier and walk rather than risk it.
So it's making your journeys longer, more hazardous. You have raised this issue, haven't you, with TfL, with City Hall. What have they said?
I mean, the problem, we've had this massive campaign with Guide Dogs looking into the research, and this can be, the bus stops that exist can be rectified. So, for example, if it's a bus stop island and there are tactiles, the guide dog will spot the tactiles. So some bus stops, the driver may pull up and not line up with the tactile, which can be a bit confusing for the dog. Or if you're a long cane user, trying to find the tactiles, which are the bumps on the floor, they're called blister. And if the cane doesn't pick up these, it's hard for a vision impaired person to know where to cross. So existing floating islands or bus stop borders could potentially be modified. Definitely floating islands over bus stop borders, because they've got the little island, the bit of concrete in between, which acts as like a safety gap between the cycle lane. So I'm definitely more in favour of the bus stop island than the bus stop border, because at least there is somewhere for the vision impaired person to get off the bus and line up. But like I said, they do need to be modified. And I think if all of the town planners and all of the designers had one template to go on, and that's kind of what the research Guide Dogs has done, if everything was uniform, first of all, then designers have like a template to go by, but then also it doesn't matter which area you travel in. As a vision impaired person, every borough is not going to be different. It will just be, you'll know that you're safe and you know that you're secure and you can travel wherever you want without having to research it.
Yeah, Miata, Taylor's experience there just show the difficulties of these floating bus stops for visually impaired people. You've got 16 of these in your borough, haven't you? Is this becoming an issue there? People talking about it?
Yeah, look, I think in the end we've got to make sure that we design our streets, our roads, our transport system in a way that is accessible for everyone, whether it's visually impaired people, people with disabilities, vulnerable people. And to be fair, I think across London we've been pretty good at with this. So if you think about the fact that all of our buses are now accessible, the Mayor has a commitment that we will have, street step-free tube stations, the proportion increasing from a third to a half. So we are trying to be good on this. I mean, my sense is that I think we've got about 1% of these floating bus stops, and then the priority is absolutely that we've got to get the design right, because it works in some instances and doesn't. So I think TfL themselves has said we've got to make sure it's consistent, and critically you have to design it so it's accessible.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you need to go back to your design and make sure it is accessible.
Chris, these were put in the first place to try and make crossings safer for cyclists. Have they been prioritised, do you think, over the needs of other pedestrians?
Well, it sounds to me like the needs of visually impaired bus users and actually others, including older people, haven't been properly taken into account as these new bus stops have been rolled out. So I'm very concerned by what Taylor said earlier. And I think that, as far as I can tell, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, hasn't adequately listened to these concerns. I agree with the charity who say they should stop rolling out any more of these bus stops until they've worked out, as Taylor said, a standardised design, make them all the same, that are safe and can be understood by everybody, cyclists and bus users as well. I don't think Sadiq Khan has so far agreed to do that. I think he's wrong, and he should listen to campaigners like Taylor and others, stop the rollout, get the design right. And if some of these bus stops that have been installed can't be remedied, then they should probably be taken out. But if they can be remedied, hopefully they can, then that work should happen urgently before any new ones get installed. That would be a common sense approach.
To be fair, I think the Mayor has listened. And actually, I think across the piece, I think the Mayor has been really good on the question of accessibility. And TfL themselves have conducted their own review and come to the conclusion that there isn't enough consistency. And that is something that needs to be addressed. So we need to get a sort of a standard set of designs that we know can work for people with disability, older people, people who are visually impaired. So I don't think there is any lack of commitment. Yeah. We now need to get on with it as we sort of think about how this rolls out across alongside anything else.
But he hasn't agreed, if I understand it right correctly, he hasn't agreed to pause the rollout while these quite serious issues get addressed. And I think that is something I would urge him to do.
Is that what your understanding is, Taylor?
Yeah, I think that these designs can't be rolled out until they've been, like you said, readdressed, because it's going to cost so much to put them in place, and then if it turns out they have to be ripped out, that's actually wasting money and time. So I think that the ones that already exist need to be modified, and then there needs to be a pause on future designs. There also, I think, needs to be training for bus stop drivers as well, because if there are bus stops that have a tactile section, sometimes the driver doesn't line up with that tactile section. So I think it goes a little bit beyond the build, and it also goes into the training for TfL and for drivers, that they actually work in conjunction with the bus stop boarders. So understand how it works, understand, if you have a vision impaired person on the bus and they can't line up, they might have to say, right, I'm going to help this person off the bus.
Yeah.
And they could do things like having little mini sort of speed bumps or ripple pads to slow the bikes down as they get towards the bus stop. They could have little mini Belisha beacons to better mark it. There are things they could do that would improve it.
Well, TfL and City Hall have said that the risks are minimal, but they continue to work with disability groups to make sure that they reduce those risks. Thank you so much, Taylor, and Julie, of course, for coming in to take us through that. Thank you.